Setting up your Sony A7S III for real estate videos. I've been shooting real estate videos on the Sony A7S III now for 3 years, and I must say it is by far the best investment that I've made in my business. The camera was leaps and bounds above its competitions when it first came out, and I believe it still is leaps and bounds above the competition today. Once your camera is on, hit the menu button in the top left hand corner of your Sony A7S III, and on the left hand side we've got a red camera icon. We're going to move across to folder number 1, image quality, click on it, and then click on file format. Right here you've got a few different codecs that you can choose from. I choose the A7SIII 4K codec. Just so you know, if you do not have a V90 card or a CF Express Type A card, you will not be able to shoot in the all intra options. You'll be limited to the A7SIII 4K. From there we move down to our movie settings and select 60 frames per second. The reason to choose 60 frames per second is so you can use slow motion within your clips. In real estate photography you want to be able to utilize slow motion, and 60 frames per second will allow you to slow your clips down by 2.5 times on a 24 frame per second timeline. And the beauty of the Sony A7S III is that it shoots 60 frames at full frame with no crop. And from there we're going to move down to the S&Q settings, and for our recording frame rate we're going to choose 24 frames per second, which is standard for our timelines that we're going to edit on, but the frame rate we want to capture is 120 frames per second. I very rarely use 120 frames per second in real estate videos. I believe it is too slow, and it does have a 1.1 crop on your image as well. From here we'll go down to folder number 8, image stabilization. In the image stabilization, I choose to keep the in-body stabilization off because I will use a stabilizer, and when you pair a stabilizer with in-body stabilization, I find they counteract each other and make for a less desirable shot. From there I'll go down to the exposure and color tab, go down to folder number 5, color tone, and I will choose picture profile 8. Picture profile 8 is Sony's S-Log3. It is a flat picture profile and it will require some color grading, but it allows you to have most flexibility in post by allowing you to bring back some highlights and increase shadows if you need to. Then we'll go down to folder number 6, which is our zebra display, or should I say zebra display. So for the zebra display I'll keep it on, and I put my zebra levels to 100. This just helps with my exposure so I don't overexpose any details that I want to keep. From here we'll move down to the purple tab, which is focus tab, and I'll move across into AF and MF, so autofocus and manual focus, move across to focus mode, and I choose continuous autofocus. I'll use autofocus sometimes, but most of the time I will focus manually. Now that your camera is set up, there's 3 things that you need to keep an eye on when capturing real estate videos, and I want you to remember them in this order. Number 1 is your shutter speed. Your shutter speed should be double your frame rate, and we're shooting at 60 frames per second, so your shutter speed should be 125. And you can change your shutter speed by turning the shutter wheel on the back and keeping that at 125. Under most circumstances, do not change that shutter speed. The second thing you want to keep an eye on is your ISO. The Sony A7S III has 2 base ISOs, the first being at 640 ISO, and the second being right up at 12,800 ISO. By keeping the ISO value at 640 or 12,800, it'll allow you to get the most dynamic range out of your camera while retaining a noise-free image. The third and final thing to gain correct exposure is your f-stop. I will typically shoot between f2.8 and f11, but I'll run between these parameters to make sure that I'm exposed correctly. To gain correct exposure in S-Log3, overexpose by plus 1.7 and you should be right. If you'd like to see me shoot a property with this camera, click right here. Cheers.